Caspar Berry, professional poker player. Thank you for joining us here at Fun Forum International. You're here to impart some of your poker psychology, if you like.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think poker has a lot to tell us about the way that we take risks generally, but also the way we make decisions generally, which we do all the time.
So what will your presentation be telling the delegates today?
So my presentation is about uncertainty, particularly today. I'm doing two presentations, in fact. One is about uncertainty and just the way that I think we should embrace uncertainty more. And I think as a poker player, you have to embrace uncertainty, and it taught me that it's not a bad thing. And then I'm doing a more pokery-based workshop, which is taking us through a few scenarios in poker and saying specifically what can we take from that and apply to our lives.
Are this group of people very risk averse generally, and is that something you can help with?
I don't think they're very risk averse. I mean, first of all, risk aversion is a very subjective thing. So I work with the police, for example, in the UK, who feel very risk averse because they're dealing with process and procedure all the time. But the police put people in the line of fire on a daily basis. So that shows that an organisation, in fact, sometimes the most risk-tolerant organisations seem like the most risk-averse. So financial services have a lot of protocol and procedure and law, but again, they have to take quite a risk on a daily basis. So no, I don't think they're risk-averse. I think they just think about it in a certain context. Can I help? Hopefully I can help anyone. But I would say, yeah, there's an awful lot that you can take from poker. It depends where someone is on that spectrum. I mean, if someone is at the coalface trading every single day, they should actually, in theory, make a great poker player anyway. If someone is in that position where they'd like to learn more about trading and risk generally, but don't necessarily have a PhD in statistics or maths, then yes, I think poker is a great learning metaphor for that.
So you expect to see some good poker players here today?
Yeah, you would do, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it became almost sort of de rigueur for poker players in the cull of 2008. Sorry, for traders in the cull of 2008 to just go and play poker. I mean, I know several, who just did that because the skills are directly transferable.
So they're some of your competitors?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they became online players, definitely, and some of the best.
Going forward and long-term future for this industry depends upon a bit of innovation and change as well.
Yeah, well that's where, okay, so here's the interesting thing about risk. So you said, are they risk tolerant, are they risk averse? So I'm going to identify three kinds of risk, right? There's operational risk, which I keep saying cold face, right? And there I'm trading. Then there's strategic risk, okay, which is a company's general direction and, what are we going to do for the next 5 years? And then there's personal risk. And those are very different, right? It's possible to have a company which is very risk averse operationally, lawyers, for example, who should now, particularly in the legal sector, in fact, be much more risk tolerant strategically because it's changing rapidly. And what you tend to find is, let's pick lawyers, but I'm not talking about any individual, who are very risk averse operationally, and that's right. That tends to bleed through into being very risk averse personally, and that's not right, because the ability to challenge, the ability to propose, the ability to try new things, test, learn, all of those things require risk tolerance. So there needs to be a distinction between those different things, and yes, this industry is no different to any other.
You talked there about learning, and what this conference particularly aims to do is give these delegates something to go away with and actually put into their business. Do you find it a really interesting environment? Are there opportunities here that there aren't elsewhere?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think I work at a lot of conferences, and I think these really stand out as deliverers of great information, which challenges. I want to identify, if you like, two different kinds of learning, though. I think there's a learning that we tend to think about when we say learning, which is university learning or curriculum learning, right? Here are some answers, and at some point you'll be tested on it or whatever, or just here are some facts, take them away. And then there's learning which is more like learning is in life, right? Which is I'm finding my way, I'm trying to establish something new rather than just pick up something that someone's told me or synthesize and create something new. And that requires one very, very different skill, which is apt to what I talk about, and that is the ability to fail. Okay, so if you're going to create something new, if you're going to find your way in the dark, it's more like a maze than a labyrinth. I learned this the other day. Do you know a labyrinth? A labyrinth is not a maze. A labyrinth, you just follow the track, and eventually you'll get to the centre, and then eventually you'll get out again.
Oh, okay.
Right? Yeah, that's a labyrinth. I didn't know that.
Different to a
yeah,
maze.
Yeah. So life is more like a maze where you will take dead ends, and it's that ability to psychologically deal with that will determine how well you learn in that world, and particularly a world where the actual maze itself is changing on a daily basis, which is more like the world we live in today.
The ability to fail there that you talked about is a bit about this investing for the long term as well, because there are going to be peaks and troughs, and you've got to hang in there and stick with it if you like.
Yeah, and I think therefore what I talk about, which I've been doing for 10 years now, is becoming more and more relevant in that way. Because if you go back, 50 years, people had, not just a 5-year plan, but a 25-year plan. In fact, you were making business investment. Cement. I was talking about with someone the other day. You build a cement plant, it has like a 50-year payback. Whereas now in the new economy, that the technology is going to be different in 5 years. I've got a friend who works in credit card business who was off for 6 weeks, and his entire job had changed when he came back. His entire job and all his colleagues and everything had just completely changed. And that wasn't just because they had a reorganisation, that was just the gradual movement of change in the credit card business. It's going to mobile. No one knows what the next 2 years is going to look like.
Yeah.
I know that because I've talked to people at the very highest level. So if you're dealing with that, this skill, which as I say, I've been talking about for 10 years, becomes more and more relevant, which is, can you flex? Can you adapt? Are you prepared, as you said, to take the long-term view, but in a world which is constantly changing in the short term?
And you're, in the meantime, by the way, you're navigating yourself through a maze constantly as well.
Yeah. It's crazy. But I do think that, again, for me, it's quite a personal journey that I've been on during that time, because 10 years ago I was an oddity, really, and since then, let's look, Jim Collins, his latest book, Good by Choice, so he's one of the pillars of the establishment of learning, of business thinking, and his latest book is, I'm not saying he copied me, he might have, I don't know, there's videos out there, he could have. But it's almost exactly what I was saying 10 years ago. And it's not that I was being revolutionary, it's just that these things have bubbled up from being a bit left field to being quite mainstream thinking. That
in business, yeah,
that this is how risk works. Business has always taken risk, but maybe not overtly as much as it is now.
Caspar Berry, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure, thank you.